let us look at the learning outcomes. After studying this module, you shall be able to know the process of feasibility analysis, identify the phases of feasibility studies, identify the elements of good feasibility studies, learn the major areas of feasibility studies, and then learn the feasibility studies in SDLC. Introduction. Feasibility analysis is a process undertaken to determine whether the project is worth proceeding with or not. It evaluates the future of the project idea within the limitations imposed by the environment upon it and also the constraints of the implementing body. Generally, the outcome of the study can give a positive result under which the decision to proceed with the project is taken, otherwise the project can be abandoned. Sometimes the data is not sufficient to arrive at any decision, and in that case further information is collected till a decision can be reached. The feasibility analysis consists of 3 stages. These are pre-feasibility study, feasibility study and project report. This module has been designed to discuss the areas to be covered under feasibility study, features of good study and also the elements of feasibility studies. Let's look at the feasibility study as a concept. The future of project idea needs to be evaluated duly considering the constraints and limitations of project, implementing body and also the surrounding environment. The projects identified are usually analyzed so as to establish the viability of the project from the point of view of technical marketing, financial, etc. The feasibility analysis involves detailed analysis and evaluation of the project from all relevant angles. The comprehensive guidelines for project feasibility studies and evaluation are published by several institutions like United Nations, UNIDO, Geneva, OECD, Development Center, Paris, World Bank Group, Washington, DC, Asian Development Bank, Manila, BPE, Government of India, that is Bureau of Public Enterprises. Although the basic concepts, tools and techniques are the same, but different guidelines, manuals and authors have called project phases by different names. UNIDO has divided project cycles and phases as follows. 1. Pre-investment phase. This covers A. Identification of investment opportunities, B. Preliminary selection stage, C. Project formulation stage and D. Evaluation and decision stage. 2. Investment phase. This will cover A. Negotiations and contracting stage, B. Project design stage, C. Construction stage, D. Startup stage, and thirdly operational phase, which will cover short-term view and long-term view. Let's look at the feasibility studies features. The following are the important features of a feasibility study. A. After pre-feasibility study. The feasibility study must be made only after pre-feasibility study if results are positive and affirmative. B. Related to any aspect. The feasibility study could be related to any aspects of the project. It means it is not confined to starting a new venture. The feasibility study is that type of study which can be conducted in different situations which are found by the investor. The project includes modification of existing product lines, adding new into existing ones, subsidiary or allied projects can be considered by the manufacturer. So, expert should not ignore the importance of feasibility study. The feasibility study is important both in case of existing company and in case of new venture. Third, detailed, reliable, complete, etc. The feasibility study is likely to be much detailed, sophisticated, complete and covering almost same grounds as in case of pre-feasibility study. The feasibility study will result into certain formats, specifications, reliability, estimation about different data of the project. It is also likely to provide us much reliable information to decide or test viability of the product. D. Clarity of doubts. In feasibility study, certain points may be doubtful, but after the feasibility study, no doubt remains about the soundness of the project. It is final decision. That is why projections developed under feasibility study should not be defective. E. Persons involved. The feasibility study is done by different persons depending upon the situation. For example, it can be investor himself, entrepreneur, consultant, planner or development agencies. What are the elements of a good feasibility study? The fundamental activities involved in preparation of feasibility study are equally applicable to any type of project since these activities are very generic in nature. The project may be for acquisition, development of software, for systems or for any other project. In fact, feasibility study includes A. Defining the problem under consideration, B. Analyzing the current mode of operation, C. Defining the requirements, D. Evaluating the various alternatives, and E. An agreed upon and approved course of action. Feasibility study determines the worthiness of the project and also evaluates the future of the project. This feasibility study should include the scope of the opportunity, the strength and weakness of the project, the requirements as per the object of the project, etc. The feasibility study should also include the course of action, its review, etc. The following are the main components of an effective feasibility study. A. Scope of the project. B. Current analysis. C. Requirements as per the object of the project. D. Recommended course of action. E. The cost effectiveness of the approach. And lastly, concluding part. Now, what is the scope of the project? It is used to formulate a business problem. The scope should be very well defined and specific. It is also important to define different parts of the business that are directly or indirectly affected by the project. Very many projects which start with great promises but without well-defined scope wither with time and do not reach their objectives. Current analysis. The existing method of implementation is required to be defined and understood under current analysis. It may be in relation with system, product or any other parameter. After conducting the current analysis, it may be inferred that there is no need to completely modify the system and just some mere modifications are required. There is a need to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the existing system. It is always possible that certain elements under the current system and in product may still be useful equally in the new system also. It means that no new fresh efforts are required on these elements. There may be few modifications and adaptations only. It will certainly save precious time and money. The feasibility study may be completed well in time. Had this analysis not been undertaken, these useful elements would have remained undiscovered. Now, what are the requirements as per the object of the project? The requirements of the project are to be identified and documented as per the basic object of the project. These requirements may be in relation to infrastructure, technology, information system, software, special operating system, utilities, heavy equipment, etc. This element of feasibility study is as important as it is the nature and type of project on which the requirements are based. For example, a manufacturing project may require substantial land resources, but software solution project requires relatively lesser space but expert IT professionals. Now, what is the recommended course of action? It is quite obvious that out of various alternatives available, one or more are preferred and selected. There is a good need to explain the logic behind selection of a particular course of action. At this point, the use of existing structures and commercial alternatives are considered. Cost effectiveness of the approach. The approach selected should also be tested with respect to cost effectiveness. In this segment, not only the estimated total cost of the recommended project is considered, but also the cost of other alternatives in order to facilitate comparison. The approach to development projects is different in the sense that a project schedule is prepared showing the entire project path, that is, from the very beginning and up to the end, showing clearly the sequence of all the activities. Thereafter, a summary is prepared which elucidates the cost benefit analysis as well as the final return on investments. Concluding part. This is the assembly portion of the feasibility study wherein all the preceding elements are considered with a formal review. There are two fundamental purposes of the review. The very first being a thorough check so as to substantiate its accuracy, and the ultimate purpose is to take final call on the acceptability of the project. It is important to note that it is not necessary to take an affirmative decision always. It may be rejection of the project or may be required to be revised before finalization of any decision. In the case of approval of the project, the documentation should be completed in all respects, including the signatures of all the concerned parties, indicating the final acceptance. If the project is rejected, then it is always desirable to explain the valid and persuasive reasons of rejection. This should form part of entire documentation. Now, what are the major areas of feasibility study? The major areas of feasibility study are the following. 1. Technical feasibility. 2. Economic feasibility. 3. legal feasibility, 4. Operational feasibility, 5. Scheduling feasibilities, 6. Market and real estate feasibility, 7. Resource feasibility, 8. Cultural feasibility, 9. Financial feasibility, and lastly market research study. Let's look at each one of them. Technical feasibility. The technical feasibility study aims to determine whether or not the product is technically feasible. This study determines how the technical requirements of the project can be fulfilled, which location would be the most appropriate, and what should be the size of the plant. This study and demand and markets feasibility study are the important prerequisites for evaluating project prospects for commercial profitability and national economic profitability, upon which the final decision should depend. The technical study also provides the basis for cost estimating. Aspects to be covered in technical feasibility. A suitable technical feasibility should cover the following steps, that is 1. Materials and inputs, 2. Production technology, 3. Product mix, 4. Location and site, 5. Plant capacity, 6. Structures and civil works, 7. Machinery and equipment, 8. Project chart and layouts, and 9. Work schedule. What is economic feasibility? The proposed project should provide favorable economic benefits to the entity. The economic feasibility assessment is conducted to analyze this aspect. There is also a need to identify and quantify the economic benefits that is expected to be provided by the project. This feasibility necessarily involves a comparative analysis of cost and benefits. Legal feasibility. Every entity is bound to fulfill the legal requirements. There is a need to study the legal scenario and to see the legal implications of the project. It necessarily involves ethical consideration. So, it is also called as ethical feasibility. Before the actual execution of the project is undertaken, it has to be ensured that it meets all ethical and legal requirements. Operational feasibility. In the execution of the project, the entity is expected to face some problems, and also there may be some opportunities arising in the course of the project. The operational feasibility is a measure of this fact only, that is, the ability to solve problems and taking advantage of the opportunities. The assessment under this study emphasizes on the degree to which the proposed project fits in the existing scenario and also the objectives with regard to the following, that is, development schedule, delivery date, corporate culture and existing business processes. To ensure success, there are certain parameters to be considered at very early stage of design. These include the following: reliability, maintainability, supportability, usability, productivity, disposability, sustainability, and lastly, affordability. In fact, this feasibility is a critical aspect of systems engineering and also needs to be an integral part of the early design phases. It is so because a system becomes most effective for the desired purposes when its design includes the technical and operating characteristics. Schedule feasibility. The time element of a project has its own importance. It is so because A project will fail or is unsuccessful if it takes too much time to complete. It means there is a need to estimate the time required to develop the system. The deadline for the project needs to be initiated. It is also necessary to decide the desirability or whether the deadlines are mandatory. It is also ascertained whether the company currently has the required time resources for undertaking the project. The possibility of completion of project in the available time is also checked. Market and real estate feasibility. The demand and market study is the thorough analysis of the market for the product to be manufactured by the industrial project. It helps us to know the market penetration, capacity to enter into the market as compared to the total market. It is important that if after the feasibility study, on the basis of demand and market study, it is finding that market is not sufficient, then the project idea should be abandoned immediately. The information determined under demand and market study includes the following. 1. The size and composition of present demand in the market. 2. Market segments identified. 3. Demand projection of overall market, market penetration, and lastly, broad pricing structure. The real estate feasibility answers the questions like the type and kind of property required. 2. The availability of the requirement in the market. 3. The related legal aspect. And lastly, the impact of business on the area. Now, what is resource feasibility? The execution of the project requires availability of required resources. It is required to be seen whether we have enough resources or the facilities necessary for the project. This feasibility finds out the type and amount of resources required, the dependency on the others, the alternatives in hand, or the sources in case of emergency, etc. Cultural feasibility. The impact of the project on both local and general cultures needs to be analyzed in advance. Such types of environmental implications are studied in this feasibility study. The culture of the entity should not be clashed for the success of the project. Financial feasibility. The financial feasibility tries to take projections about earning prospects of an industrial project. The following 4 aspects are to be considered in this study. 1. The total investment cost. 2. Sales revenue. 3. Operating cost. And lastly, cash flows. Market research study. The product or services to be sold or rendered should be marketable. This study examines these important aspects. It will assess the potential sales of the product, its absorption and market capture rates of the project. Coverage under pre-feasibility study. The following points should be covered by the planners of the concern while making pre-feasibility study. First, the product description. The characteristics of the product should be equally described along with possible substitutes which are available in the market. The subsidiary or allied products should also be identified which can be manufactured along with the main product. Second, description of the market. The present and projected potential market and its competitive nature must be specified with reference to the following aspects. 1. The status of the present location of the manufacturing. 2. How many competitors are operating in the market and their corresponding specialization, if any. Third, what are the national production, imports and exports. 4. Are there any governmental controls or incentives? 5. What is the estimated consumption? 6. What is the price structure? And 8. What is the estimated product durability for future consumption? 3. Technology. The technology choices for the manufacture of the product should be described briefly. Also, the key plant location factors listed below should be identified. 1. Labor. 2. Proximity or nearness to market and raw material. 3. Transportation facilities and cost. And 4. Water availability. 4. Cost estimates. The estimates should be to meet the necessary investment cost and production cost. 5th, estimated profit. The information collected should include estimates of profit of business firms manufacturing similar products or an actual estimated profit for the project under study. 6. Other factors. In certain cases, the following aspects may be the most important in the judgment of suitability of the project, especially in case of new project. That is, local attitude towards industry, education, recreational and civic background, and availability of the local sites. The pre-feasibility study can be considered a combination of different steps which permit determination of the fact whether or not a complete and detailed feasibility study should be undertaken. The pre-feasibility study is an essential and not a wasteful exercise. It should be noted that since the pre-feasibility study is a screening device, it can be discontinued at any point where information gathered indicates the rejection of project idea. Feasibility study in SDLC. The project analysis and its impact may be studied in relation to all types of projects, whether these are related with manufacturing, marketing, or even in case of development of information system for the organization. This necessarily involves some special considerations like input devices, transaction processing, communication channels, database management, etc., rather than raw material, labor, machinery, etc., which are considered in a pure manufacturing project. These type of projects are under different legal umbrellas, including Information Technology Act, cyber laws, etc. This portion of module discusses the overall related aspects and issues. The system development projects basically involve SDLC, the system development life cycle. Includes set of activities which are conducted by system analysts, designers and users to develop and implement the required information system. The SDLC can be viewed as a systematic process-oriented system development framework. There are mainly 7 activities which together form the SDLC. These are preliminary investigation. This can be divided into 5 steps, that is problem definition, conducting investigation, identifying the options and testing project feasibility. B. System analysis. C. System design. D. System construction. E. System testing. F. System implementation. G. System maintenance and PIR. The testing of feasibility is performed after the identification of the options. These options are tested for the following, that is technical feasibility, economic feasibility, operational feasibility, behavioral feasibility, resource feasibility, legal feasibility and schedule feasibility. Technical feasibility. This feasibility is related to analysis of ability and capability of different types of hardware and software for viable options. In this, analyst also evaluates whether the proposed system is feasible with existing or expected computer hardware and software technologies. The analysts analyze various issues like, is existing technology more viable or new technology will be better for option under consideration? Can the technology under consideration handle the required volume of data efficiently? Will this system under consideration expandable as per the future requirement? Will there be sufficient efficiency, accuracy and reliability in operation when the considered technology is used? Some of the key technology consideration in above analysis is, let's make a table, consideration and alternatives. 1. Types of input devices for data entry, that is keyboards, scanner, touch screen. 2. Output medium. The alternatives could be display device, printer, etc. C. Types of transaction processing. The alternative could be batch or direct. 4. Communication channels for data communication. The alternatives could be telephone line, cable, etc. 5. Types of database management, or alternative could be file system or DBMS. 6. Type of central process. Alternative could be micro, mini or mainframe. The technically feasible system may not be economically viable, or the staff may not be technically competent to operate the system. Economic feasibility. This feasibility considers all incremental costs and benefits if the system option is implemented. It has many intangible benefits, therefore it is difficult to compute. The cost of hardware, software and investigations are considered, whereas benefits will include reduced costs and other benefits. Let's look at with the help of a diagram. Costs. These can be divided into development costs, operating costs and intangible costs. Development costs will include salaries of system development staff, cost of conversion of data files, cost of testing the system and cost of new or expanded computer facilities. Operating costs will include hardware or software rental or depreciation, salaries of computer staff, cost of input data presentation and controls, cost of data processing supplies, maintenance cost and other overheads. Intangible costs will include, these cannot be easily measured in terms of money like loss in employees' productivity due to loss of morale and loss of goodwill due to initial system errors. Now, what are the benefits? Benefits include increase in sales or profits, decrease in data processing costs, decrease in operating costs, increase in customer services, improved customer service, improved employee morale, and better decision making. Operational feasibility. This feasibility is related with the operational parameters in terms of use of computer facilities by users, that is employees, customers and suppliers, etc. It involves following analysis, that is there sufficient support from the users and management for the system to be developed? Are the users involved in the planning and development of the project? If yes, then there will be less resistance and more adaptability for better technology. Are the current business methods acceptable to users? Will there be loss of control, slower processing in some areas if the system is implemented, etc.? Behavioral feasibility. In this feasibility, the issues related to the system environment, primarily collection of inputs, is analyzed, whether the required inputs will be available on time for processing, mainly when inputs are to be provided by external entities, for example suppliers, banks, etc. Resource feasibility. Although the issues addressed in this feasibility are covered to some extent in the operational and technical feasibilities, in this feasibility primarily the issues related to availability of human resources are determined, mainly when system is to be maintained in non-metro locations. Legal feasibility. This is primarily performed to determine whether there will be any conflict between new proposed system and organization legal obligation. Schedule feasibility. This feasibility is related with the time estimates that an option under analysis will take. Management may take decision on this basis whether proposed time is acceptable for system development or not. Let us summarize. Feasibility analysis is a process undertaken to determine whether the project idea is worth proceeding with or not. The feasibility analysis involves detailed analysis and evaluation of the project from all relevant angles. UNIDO has divided project cycles and phases as pre-investment phase, investment phase and operational phase. The feasibility study must be made only after pre-feasibility study if results are positive and affirmative. The fundamental activities involved in preparation of feasibility study are equally applicable to any type of project, since these activities are very generic in nature. The major areas of feasibility study are technical, economic, legal, operational, scheduling, market and real estate feasibility, resource feasibility, cultural feasibility, financial feasibility and market research study.